Okay, nice. Okay.
Nalia, confident and unbothered, made his intentions clear. He was here to eliminate Megumi. Before Yuji could even process the weight of those words, Nalia's figure blurred, and in a blink, he landed between the two like a lightning strike. Yuji barely had time to raise his guard before Nalia drove a jab into his throat, sending him reeling. Choso leapt in with a retaliatory strike, but Nalia's counter came just as fast, knocking him back with a precise blow. Realizing brute strength wasn't enough, Yuji and Choso coordinated, charging Nalia from both sides in perfect sync. But Nalia, unfazed, activated his projection technique, gliding effortlessly between their attacks, distancing himself again without so much as a scratch. Yuji, catching his breath, murmured that something was strange about Naoya's movements. Choso agreed, suspecting it was a cursed technique enhancing his speed. Naoya, still calm and composed, looked over at Yuji with mild curiosity, remarking that the boy had turned out to be more resilient than he'd anticipated. Yet, despite the surprise, one thing continued to gnaw at him. He had no idea who the man standing beside Yuji actually was. Before the tension could rise any further, the world around them shifted. All three fighters froze mid step, their instincts prickling as a wave of cursed energy swept across the area like a tide, thick and overwhelming. Yuji's first thought went to Gojo, but as the sensation deepened, he realized it wasn't his teacher's presence. This was something else, something far more ominous. Turning slowly, he spotted the source, a lone figure standing motionless atop a rooftop. The moonlight bathed the figure's silhouette in silver as Yuta Okatsu stood still, his eyes cold and locked onto Yuji like a predator ready to hunt. Quick to enter the fray, Yuta wasted no time. Unsheathing his blade in one smooth motion, he leapt off the rooftop, landing with a thunderous crash that sent shockwaves through the ground. The sheer impact crumbled the bridge beneath him, collapsing it entirely. Both Yuji and Choso stood stunned as Yuta began advancing, step by heavy step, his expression unreadable. Choso felt a chill run down his spine. The cursed energy radiating from Yuta was undeniable. This wasn't someone they could take lightly. He quickly concluded that Yuta must be Yuji's executioner and warned the boy without delay. Before Yuji could process the warning, Naoya cut in, casually confirming Yuta's identity and adding that he was on his side. The name rang a bell in Yuji's mind. He remembered Megumi mentioning a second year student by that name, someone who held the same special grade status as Gojo. Still bothered by Naoya's presence, Yuta narrowed his eyes and asked who he was. Naoya, unfazed, introduced himself as Maki's cousin and assured Yuta that he had no intention of getting in his way. All he cared about was seeing Yuji dead. Meanwhile, Choso leaned closer to Yuji, urging him to escape while he handled Naoya. He stressed that being caught up in a chase with that Zenin would be far too dangerous and insisted he could manage on his own. Yuji, torn with concern, asked if Choso would truly be all right. The older brotherly figure nodded firmly, warning Yuji of the danger Yuta posed and urging him to focus solely on escaping from the sword wielder. With that, Choso promised they'd meet at their usual place and motioned for Yuji to go. But Naoya and Yuta weren't about to let them split up so easily. With uncanny timing, Naoya shot forward and landed a crushing kick into Choso's gut, interrupting his blood technique mid-activation. Simultaneously, Yuta sprinted after Yuji and with terrifying speed closed the distance between them in seconds. Choso, wincing from the blow, realized too late that he had misjudged their chances of stopping Yuta. He scoffed at his own mistake, but his thoughts were cut short as Naoya's fist connected with his face, sending him staggering backward. Standing tall and without an ounce of fear, Naoya calmly remarked on Choso's blood manipulation technique. He found it strange why someone outside the Kamo clan possessed such a skill, but ultimately didn't care. In his eyes, the duel was already decided. Choso's death was inevitable, but Choso, his resolve burning fiercer than ever, shot back that he would not let Naoya walk away alive after coming for his little brother. Elsewhere, Yuta pursued Yuji relentlessly. Trying to shake him, Yuji sprinted toward a car resting on its side, vaulted over it, and attempted to break Yuta's line of sight. But Yuta anticipated the move, cutting across to the other side and swinging his blade to intercept. Just in time, Yuji grabbed the car and twisted his body midair, narrowly evading the strike. Yuta blinked, surprised at the maneuver, but Yuji didn't stop. He turned and hurled the car toward him with all his might, forcing Yuta to react and giving himself a few more seconds. Seizing the opening, Yuji darted toward a nearby alleyway, hoping the tight corners of the buildings would offer some cover. But before he could slip inside, the car came flying back toward him. He barely dodged it. Yuji, now wide-eyed, finally grasped just how strong Yuta truly was. He didn't look like a power-type fighter, yet his cursed energy reinforcement made up for everything. Yuta was, in every way, his opposite. As if responding to his thoughts, Yuta admitted that he had even more cursed energy than their teacher. But Gojo was still superior, because while he himself might run out of cursed energy, Gojo could conserve his almost infinitely thanks to Six Eyes. Gojo could conserve his almost infinitely thanks to Six Eyes. Deciding their conversation had gone on long enough, Yuta dashed forward again, his blade shimmering with cursed energy. Yuji ducked and weaved, struggling to avoid each swing. It wasn't just the sword. Yuta's entire body pulsed with cursed power, making every movement dangerous. Yuji realized it wasn't about reading his opponent anymore. The real issue was that Yuta's cursed energy allowed him to dampen the damage from any hit. But despite that, Yuji gritted his teeth and told himself he couldn't afford to die just yet. Yuta, though, kept pressing, his blade slicing through the air with terrifying accuracy. Yuji did his best to dodge, but the attacks came faster and faster. He knew he needed to do something about that sword. If he didn't, he'd be cut down before long. Thinking quickly, he pulled back and sprinted toward a nearby car, diving through the open window. Inside, he spotted a small knife on the passenger seat. He grabbed it and leapt out the opposite side, just in time as Yuta closed in. Yuta vaulted over the car's hood and swung, but this time Yuji blocked it. Yuta blinked in surprise as he noticed the knife in Yuji's hand, briefly wondering where it came from. But Yuji didn't give him time to ponder. He followed up with a sharp strike of his own, only for Yuta to block it with ease. Realizing his blunt knife still wasn't enough, Yuji tried channeling cursed energy into the blade, but his control was shaky, and when Yuta countered again, he barely managed to hold it off. Observing the struggle, Yuta calmly reminded him that he was too focused on the sword. Then, lifting his own, he drove his foot forward, landing a heavy kick to Yuji's gut and sending him flying. Yuji reeled from the sheer force of the kick. It felt like a sledgehammer to his ribs, but he gritted through the pain, barely recovering before Yuta closed in again, this time slashing through his stomach and breaking his knife in the process. But Yuji used the momentum to his advantage. Twisting his body mid-blow, he caught Yuta's blade with his leg, jamming it into the ground. With a loud crack, the sword snapped in two, and Yuta slid back, caught off guard. Looking down at his broken weapon, Yuta silently acknowledged that this wasn't going to be easy, not with someone trained by Gojo. Yuji, clutching his side but still standing, felt a small surge of confidence. The wound wasn't deep, and now they were both without weapons. He stepped forward to press the advantage, only for a cold hand to suddenly grab his face from behind. A second hand wrapped tightly around his head. It was Rika. Her voice was cold and unfeeling as she asked what was happening here. Yuta, completely unfazed, told her they were just playing and politely asked her to hold Yuji down for him. Yuji struggled in her grip, shocked by the raw power pinning him in place. He couldn't tell if she was a Shikigami or something else entirely, but before he could break free, Yuta stepped forward and calmly drove the broken blade into Yuji's chest. Blood burst from his lips as Yuta looked into his eyes and apologized. From deep within, Sukuna stirred, momentarily surprised, but then he saw something and grinned. Back in the underpass, Choso was hanging on by a thread. Naoya's projection sorcery allowed him to dart around like lightning, and every punch he landed hit like a truck. Choso, bleeding and battered, still hadn't figured out the technique's mechanics. And worse, without control over external blood, his convergence attack was off the table. Naoya, noting the man's resilience, admitted he was tougher than he looked, but curiosity got the better of him, and he asked just who Choso really was. Choso's gaze turned ice cold. He declared himself the eldest of 10 siblings, activating his flowing red scale technique and letting cursed energy flood his limbs, sharpening his speed. Naoya, unimpressed by Choso's response, sidestepped with blinding speed using his projection technique and reappeared behind him for a clean strike. But this time, Choso's eyes followed him perfectly. Reacting just in time, he turned to intercept the attack. Even so, Naoya evaded the counter and landed a sharp blow to Choso's gut, sending him stumbling back. As he tried to stabilize himself, Choso glanced down and noticed a fresh wound leaking blood rapidly from his abdomen. Naoya smirked at the sight and pulled out a small knife, casually revealing that he'd decided to interfere with Choso's blood manipulation. He asked mockingly how long Choso could keep fighting in such a state. Still rambling, Naoya admitted it wasn't exactly dignified for a sorcerer to carry a weapon and requested Choso keep it to himself. He rationalized his decision by sharing his disdain for sorcerers who depended on tools to win, calling them pathetic and even criticizing his own older brothers for flaunting their weapons proudly. Choso, narrowing his eyes, questioned if Naoya truly held that much hatred for his siblings. Naoya, without hesitation, confirmed it, stating that older brothers who were weaker than their younger siblings served no purpose, but Choso had a different perspective. For him, older brothers were meant to be examples to follow. That responsibility, he claimed, is what gave him strength. As he spoke, a surge of blood erupted from Choso's body, spreading rapidly across the ground. Naoya watched, stunned by the sheer volume, unable to understand how Choso was still alive. What he didn't know was that as a death-painting womb, Choso possessed hybrid blood, a mix of cursed spirit and human. which allowed him to convert cursed energy into blood itself. So long as his energy held, blood loss could never be his end. Using that very power, Choso manipulated the spreading blood into a towering wall, breaking Naoya's line of sight. Perplexed by the slow pace of the technique, Naoya assumed Choso was finally collapsing from exhaustion. But before he could act, Choso suddenly appeared at his flank and launched a piercing blood attack. Naoya narrowly dodged it, only to notice that the ground was now covered in blood, creeping toward him. Alarmed, he focused on avoiding contact, but that split-second distraction cost him. Choso landed a sharp kick, which Naoya barely blocked in time. But something was wrong. A heavy sensation gripped Naoya's limbs. Looking down, he realized with a sinking feeling that blood had stained his clothes. Choso had already infiltrated his body's surface with minute traces, manipulating his movements and slowing him down. Across from him, Choso began preparing another piercing blood attack. With a calm and confident air, he declared this to be the checkmate for the supposed heir of the Zenin clan. Naoya, however, refused to be rattled. He stated coldly that despite the binding effects, he could still move and challenge Choso to try. He had faith in his cursed technique, believing he could dodge anything Choso could throw at him. But then something shifted. Locked in a final stare, Naoya sensed something unfamiliar. It wasn't the usual piercing blood technique. What emerged instead was something far more volatile, an original move developed through over a century of floating blood manipulation. Supernova. A massive orb of blood exploded in all directions, erupting into countless high-speed projectiles, striking Naoya relentlessly from every angle and leaving him crumpled in defeat. As silence settled over the aftermath of their brutal confrontation, Yuta stepped out of the shadows, dragging Yuji by the hoodie. His body hung limp, swaying lifelessly in Yuta's grip. Choso turned on the supernatural move, what something unfamiliar, something technical, still to be with action of flank, and launched it, low pace, spring wall, breaking Naoya's line of sight. Perplexed by the slow pace of the technique, Naoya assumed Choso was finally collapsing from exhaustion. But before he could act, Choso suddenly appeared at his flank and launched a piercing blood attack. Naoya narrowly dodged it, only to notice that the ground was now covered in blood, creeping toward him. Alarmed, he focused on avoiding contact, but that split-second distraction cost him. Choso landed a sharp kick, which Naoya barely blocked in time. But something was wrong. A heavy sensation gripped Naoya's limbs. Looking down, he realized with a sinking feeling that blood had stained his clothes. Choso had already infiltrated his body's surface with minute traces, manipulating his movements and slowing him down. Across from him, Choso began preparing another piercing blood attack. With a calm and confident air, he declared this to be the checkmate for the supposed heir of the Zenin clan. Naoya, however, refused to be rattled. He stated coldly that despite the binding effects, he could still move and challenge Choso to try. He had faith in his cursed technique, believing he could dodge anything Choso could throw at him. But then something shifted. Locked in a final stare, Naoya sensed something unfamiliar. It wasn't the usual piercing blood technique. What emerged instead was something far more volatile, an original move developed through over a century of honing blood manipulation. Supernova. A massive orb of blood exploded in all directions, erupting into countless high-speed projectiles, striking Naoya relentlessly from every angle and leaving him crumpled in defeat. As silence settled over the aftermath of their brutal confrontation, Yuta stepped out of the shadows, dragging Yuji by the hoodie. His body hung limp, swaying lifelessly in Yuta's grip. Choso turned in surprise, barely registering the movement before a sharp blow landed square on his face, knocking him straight to the ground. Yuta took a moment to scan around his limb, stepped relentless, a rough move developed. What emerged instead was something far more volatile, an original move developed through over a century of honing blood manipulation, supernova. A massive orb of blood exploded in all directions, erupting into countless high-speed projectiles, striking.
Bukan bang, ini lagi liatin manganya Jujutsu Kaisen. Gue lah nonton.
Kicking Naoya relentlessly from every angle and leaving him crumpled in defeat. As silence settled over the aftermath of their brutal confrontation, Yuta stepped out of the shadows, dragging Yuji by the hoodie. His body hung limp, swaying lifelessly in Yuta's grip. Choso turned in surprise, barely registering the movement before a sharp blow landed square on his face, knocking him straight to the ground. Yuta took a moment to scan the battlefield and then turned his gaze toward Naoya, now crawling, bloodied, broken, and struggling to stay upright. From where he lay, Naoya could feel Yuta's eyes on him. A twisted fury bubbled inside, humiliated by the fact that Yuta was looking down on him. His pride reeled. But before he could speak, a gush of blood erupted from his mouth. For a moment, panic overtook him. He wondered if it was poison or some lingering effect of Choso's technique. But as the nausea twisted in his stomach, a more chilling realization set in. Choso wasn't human. He was a full-fledged curse. And now, after enduring a brutal hit from such a being, his own body was rejecting the non-human blood it had absorbed. Watching him writhe, Yuta offered to heal Naoya using reverse curse technique. But there was a condition. He wanted Naoya to report back to the higher-ups and inform them that Yuji Itadori was dead. The story then shifted into a memory, an intimate flashback from the time Yuji was just a newborn. His father, Jin, held the infant gently in his arms when Mr. Wasuke, Yuji's grandfather, entered the room with a stern expression. He urged Jin to abandon his wife, warning him in grave tones that persisting with the relationship could lead to his death. But Jin, calm and composed, replied softly not to speak of such matters in front of Yuji. Mr. Wasuke's anger flared at the response. His voice rose as he chastised Jin, reminding him of his desperation to have a child, even though it never happened with his wife. But before he could continue, a woman with stitches across her forehead interrupted and addressed Mr. Wasuke as her father-in-law, asking what exactly he was talking about. Back in the present, Yuji's breath hitched as his eyes shot open. Disoriented, he looked around and found himself lying beside a campfire, with Yuta seated across from him. Yuta, upon seeing Yuji awake, let out a short, awkward laugh followed by a relieved sigh. Returning to his usual calm tone, he explained that his attempt to kill Yuji had been nothing more than an act, an elaborate deception carried out under special circumstances. It had all been on their teacher's behalf, who, months earlier, had come to Yuta with a personal request to watch over Yuji. Yuta began recounting the conversation he had with Gojo, mentioning how Gojo had asked him to protect both the first years and second years if something were to happen to him. But he had shown particular concern for Yuji. Like Yuta, Yuji had also been marked for a secret execution, and Gojo wanted Yuta to keep him safe. So, to protect him in the long run, Yuta had come up with the plan. In order to be approved by the higher-ups as Yuji's executioner, he had to form a binding vow to truly kill him. That was the only way to keep others from coming after him. Yuji, still stunned, asked how he had survived if the vow had been real. Yuta then explained that the moment Yuji's heart stopped, he had used reverse curse technique to heal him. He wasn't entirely sure it would work, but had guessed, based on what he'd heard, that Yuji could survive it. Reflecting for a moment, Yuta noted how this marked the second time Yuji's death had been faked. He admitted the higher-ups might eventually catch on, but for now, they'd likely consider the execution complete.
Mau cuan dari trading? Bisa. Nih, pelajarin dulu dasarnya. Gimana tanda sticknya? Ada panjang, pendek,
And move on. Yuji, Still processing everything, finally asked the question that weighed most on his mind, why Yuta was going so far to save him. Without hesitation, Yuta replied that he was doing this because Yuji mattered to people who mattered to him. He shared that once, he too had possessed a power he couldn't control. At first, he felt cursed by it, as if it had been forced upon him. But with time, he learned to embrace it and use it on his own terms. He looked at Yuji gently, adding that unlike him, Yuji never even invited that power. What he carried wasn't his to begin with, and he wasn't to be blamed for all that had happened. But even so, Yuji sat in silence, the guilt of Shibuya clinging to him like an open wound, as he muttered that it no longer mattered whether it was his fault or not. Just then, a voice called out his name from the darkness. Yuji turned and saw Megumi slowly stepping into the flickering firelight. As he came to a stop beside Yuji, he urged him to return to Jujutsu High and rejoin the others. He explained that the barrier around the school was weakening, assuring them it wouldn't be a problem to get inside, as long as no one saw Yuji's face. But Yuji bristled at his words, asked him to stop pretending like everything was fine. His voice shook as he reminded Megumi that countless lives had been lost because of him. Megumi didn't deny it. He agreed that it wasn't Yuji's burden alone and admitted his own share of responsibility. He urged Yuji not to selfishly abandon his role, explaining that they weren't heroes chasing justice, but sorcerers tasked with facing curses no one else could. No one had the right to judge them. Their values
Halo,
were
halo.
only determined by their actions moving forward. They had to keep fighting, not for themselves, but for those who needed saving. Then, Megumi turned to him and quietly said that he needed saving too. Yuji's eyes widened in surprise as Megumi
kepencet.
continued, revealing that Noritoshi Kamo
Sorry.
had orchestrated a plan for those connected to the Jujutsu world to battle in the Culling Game. He revealed that his recently awakened sister, Tsumuki, was trapped within it, and pleaded with Yuji to lend his strength to help save her. Yuji considered the weight of Megumi's words before turning to Yuta, revealing a grim truth he had kept to himself. He spoke of Sukuna's involvement with Megumi and admitted that the King of Curses had taken over his body during the Shibuya incident after Yuji consumed 10 fingers all at once, bringing the total to 15. However, he quickly added that even if he consumed the remaining 5 in one go, Sukuna would not be able to take over him again. Yet, despite his confidence, Yuji solemnly requested Yuta to kill him without hesitation if Sukuna ever surfaced again. Yuta agreed firmly, no doubt or delay in his tone, and with the unspoken weight of that pact between them, Yuji turned back to Megumi to ask what came next. Megumi laid out their next move. They needed to return to Jujutsu High to make contact with Master Tengen. He explained that it was
Iya bang.
to learn how to remove the seal on the prison realm in order to free Gojo.
Ini loh, apa yang lagi S3 Jujutsu Kaisen. Nah, ini manganya, Bang.
At the same time, they had to uncover the true objectives of Noritoshi Kamo and predict his future plans. Megumi stressed that only Master Tengen could provide the answers they sought regarding the structure of the Culling Game and how to potentially disrupt it before irreversible damage was done. As he wrapped up, Yuta interjected, pointing out the critical flaw in the plan. He revealed that Master Tengen's barrier was protected by over 1,000 doors that constantly shuffled position, with only one leading to the tomb of the Star Corridor where Tengen resided. A single misstep would mean failure to reach it. Yuji, now understanding the gravity of their situation, realized the implication. If they chose wrong, they'd lose their only chance to gain answers. Just as the tension of that uncertainty began to set in, a voice emerged from the darkness. Choso stepped forward, casually noting that there was a way to bypass the barrier more efficiently. He He proposed that they do what Mahito once did by stealing Sukuna's fingers and the death painting wounds. With their course decided, the group returned to Jujutsu High, where Maki and Yuki were waiting patiently. Yuta lit up on seeing Maki, though a hint of concern crossed his face as he asked if she was well enough to move around. Maki, in her usual unwavering manner, assured him she was fine. Yuki, standing beside her, added that Maki's survival was thanks to her physical resilience granted by heavenly restriction, even though not even reverse curse technique could heal the burn scars left behind. Maki, uninterested in lingering on the topic, swiftly changed the subject and asked Megumi about Tengen's barrier. Before he could respond, Choso stepped forward once more, placing a hand on Megumi's shoulder as if to take over. He explained that between the ever-shifting doors and the tomb itself was the cursed warehouse that housed the remains of his 6 younger brothers. Through the lingering side effect of his cursed technique, Choso could still sense them, and because of that connection, he could guide them through the maze to Tengen's resting place. Yuki gave a silent nod, acknowledging that they had finally found a lead to breach the barrier. But Maki, still unsure, tilted her head and asked who Choso really was. Before the question could hang in the air too long, Yuji answered calmly, asking everyone, for the time being, to think of Choso as his older brother. The words struck a chord deep within Choso, but before the moment could swell into emotion, the group was already moving forward to execute the plan. Under Choso's guidance, they arrived at one of the doors suspected to lead to the Star Tomb. Choso, focused and certain, sensed the dormant presence of his brothers beyond the threshold. Trusting his instincts, he opened the door. What lay before them shook the group. Below stretched an eerie forest of massive, towering trees jutting out from the ground. Yuki quickly assessed the layout, spotting an elevator and directing everyone toward it.
Are you tired of low-paying jobs and finally want to work remotely? If yes,
It would take them deep into the trees, closer to the tomb, hidden at its base. With the destination now in reach, they pressed forward. They soon arrived at the corridor of the Star Tomb. As they stepped inside, Yuji noticed bloodstains along the floor and quietly wondered what had transpired here. Yuki answered, her voice heavy with memory, recalling the incident from 11 years ago when Toji Zenin assassinated the Star Plasma vessel. She implied that it was the moment when everything began to distort. Suppressing the lingering regret in her voice, Yuki guided the group further, toward the main shrine where Master Tengen was supposed to reside. Yet, upon reaching the sacred chamber, they were met with unexpected emptiness. The place was completely void of presence. A wave of confusion swept through them all. Yuki, concerned, considered that Tengen might be rejecting them. Yuta, sensing a dead end, urged everyone to retreat. But before they could turn back, a voice cut through the stillness, questioning whether they were truly planning to leave so soon. They turned to find a mysterious figure standing before them, speaking with familiarity and ease. It was Master Tengen. The group stood stunned. Tengen's appearance was completely unlike anything they had expected. Yuki, however, grew slightly agitated as she questioned the reason behind the tombs being sealed. Tengen calmly explained that it had suspected the group might be aligned with Kenjaku, adding that its abilities did not grant it insight into the human heart. The name brought confusion to Yuki, and sensing it, Tengen elaborated. Kenjaku was the true name of the ancient sorcerer who had once gone by Noritoshi Kamo and who now resided in Geto's body. Suddenly, Yuji interrupted the discussion, curiosity breaking through his concern as he asked why
Dia tanya,
Master Tengen looked so strange. With a calm smile, Tengen explained that while it was immortal, it was not immune to aging. Around a decade ago, it had failed to merge with the Star Plasma vessel, and as a result, its aging began to accelerate. Over time, its sense of self began to fade, and its existence slowly dissolved into the fabric of the world itself. Before anyone could fully digest that, Megumi and Yuta interjected, bringing the conversation back to the matter at hand. They stated the reason for their visit, requesting answers about Kenjaku's objectives and a method to open the prison realm. Tengen was willing to answer, but under one condition. It demanded that two among Yuta, Yuki, and Choso stay behind as guards to protect it. With the terms laid out, Tengen began explaining Kenjaku's plan. It revealed that Kenjaku's true objective was to force the evolution of all human beings across Japan. Megumi, already familiar with part of this plan, quickly responded, questioning why Kenjaku hadn't simply used the barrier during the Shibuya incident to awaken cursed techniques in everyone by using idol transfiguration. Tengen calmly elaborated that Kenjaku lacked the cursed energy to accomplish such a feat. Beyond that, the process of individually evolving each person was highly inefficient. That limitation led Kenjaku to a more twisted method, one that involved merging all of humankind with Tengen itself. The revelation hit hard. Yuji and Megumi were stunned, struggling to believe that such a thing could even be possible. After all, hadn't it always been said that Tengen could only merge with a star plasma vessel? But Tengen clarified that while that used to be the case, its evolution over the past 11 years had changed everything. Now it could merge with other individuals as well. Continuing, Tengen explained that anyone who merged with it would become something beyond a sorcerer, a being that simultaneously existed and didn't. But this transformation brought a terrifying risk. Although Tengen had retained its self-awareness thanks to the barrier techniques, it feared that if any human were to merge with it and then lose control, the result would be catastrophic. Such a scenario would eliminate the boundaries between individuals. The impurities of millions in Japan would spill across the world, repeating the disaster that had once consumed Tokyo, but this time on a global scale. And that, ultimately, was what Kenjaku intended to unleash. The weight of the truth shook everyone. Maki was the first to speak, quietly wondering why Tengen couldn't simply refuse to merge if it already knew Kenjaku's plan. Tengen responded without hesitation. It explained that, due to the failed merger, it had now become more cursed spirit than human. That shift made it vulnerable to cursed spirit manipulation. If it came face to face with Kenjaku, he could take control of Tengen instantly. The revelation startled them all. Now it made sense why Tengen had been rejecting visitors and why it required protection. If Kenjaku got his hands on it, everything would be over. Tengen added that Kenjaku was the second most skilled user of barrier techniques after itself, and that he could undo the seals on the tomb at any moment. Yuki, paying close attention, raised another question. Why was Kenjaku acting now after having lived for over 1,000 years? Why hadn't he merged with Tengen earlier? Tengen answered that its fate was interwoven with the Six Eyes and the Star Plasma Vessel. In the past, Kenjaku had lost twice to sorcerers bearing the Six Eyes. The second time, he eliminated all risks by killing both the Star Plasma Vessel and the Six Eyes within a month of their birth. However, on the very day of the scheduled merger, both the vessel and the Six Eyes appeared again. Frustrated, Kenjaku changed his plan and chose to seal them rather than kill them, since no two Six-Eyes sorcerers could exist at the same time. But then, something unforeseen happened, exactly 11 years ago. Toji Zenin, the anomaly, intervened. Born with no curse
Anomali,
due
gengs.
to heavenly restriction, Toji had broken the
Anomali.
chains of fate, derailing the destined convergence of Tengen, the Star Plasma Vessel, and the Six Eyes. And in the aftermath came Geto, a sorcerer capable of manipulating cursed spirits. All the pieces finally began to align for Kenjaku's grand design. The missing piece had been the prison realm, which he obtained 6 years ago, marking the beginning of his scheme. Still trying to put it all together, Megumi asked why the culling game was necessary. Tengen explained that the culling game was the ritual to gather and use the cursed energy of players, amplified through barriers, to convert the entire population of Japan into vessels for merging. Through this complex custom, Kenjaku would initiate the merging with Tengen, but such a ritual came with binding vows. The first vow prevented Kenjaku from being the master of the game, which unfortunately meant that killing him wouldn't stop the culling game. The second vow ensured that the game would only end if all players died or refused to play, yet that refusal would still lead to their deaths. In short, they were trapped. Participation was not optional, it was demanded. Before continuing further, Tengen reminded them of the earlier condition and asked who among them would stay to serve as guards. Without hesitation, both Choso and Yuki volunteered, stepping forward to protect Tengen from any approach by Kenjaku. With the matter settled, Tengen thanked them and reached into the void, retrieving a peculiar item. It explained that this object was the key to freeing Satoru Gojo. It was the back of the prison realm. Yuji, taken aback, asked whether they could unseal Gojo using it, but Tengen clarified that only Kenjaku, as the bearer of the front side, had the authority to open the gate. To break the seal by force, one would need either the inverted spear of heaven
Nah
or the black
ini
rope, two tools
nggak
capable
ada
of
nih
applying
anjir.
cursed techniques. However, both options had already been lost. Gojo had destroyed the inverted spear of heaven 11 years ago during his fight with Toji Zenin, and had eliminated the black rope last year. At the moment, freeing him seemed impossible. Yet Yuki, unwilling to give up, voiced her belief that there must still be another way. Tengen, after a pause, revealed that among the players in the culling game was a mysterious sorcerer from 1,000 years ago who called herself an angel. Her name was Hana Kurusu. Tengen advised them to find her because she possessed a rare ability to completely extinguish cursed techniques. Curious, Megumi asked whether it was truly possible to unseal Gojo using Angel's cursed technique, and if so, where this individual could be found. Tengen confirmed it, stating that she was located in the colony on the east side of Tokyo. Then, shifting focus, Tengen began to brief them on the structure of the culling game. It explained that the ritual would unfold across 10 colonies spread throughout Japan. These colonies were connected by boundary-binding barriers, forming a line down the archipelago. Over time, this chain of barriers would overlap and enshroud the country, gradually transferring the population of Japan to the other side as the first step in merging them with Tengen. Megumi, always forward-thinking, asked how long the ritual would take to complete. Tengen responded that 2 months would suffice, depending on how the game progressed. Immediately after, Tengen began detailing the rules of the culling game. The first rule was that after awakening a cursed technique, a player must declare participation in a colony of their choice within 19 days. The second rule stated that any player who breaks the first rule by not participating would be subjected to cursed technique removal. According to Yoko's theory, this would impact the brain directly, resulting in death. However, players like Maki, who did not possess a cursed technique, would not be affected by this rule. Tengen proceeded to outline the third rule, which held that any non-player who entered a colony would automatically become a participant and would be considered to have declared their involvement in the culling game. This rule raised concerns for Yuji, who asked what would happen to civilians already inside the barrier. Tengen clarified that they would be granted the opportunity to exit the game. However, it also noted that there was no specific rule preventing entry or exit from the colonies. From the start of the game, players would receive the objective of escaping the barrier, an incentive designed to stimulate competition. Tengen added that the barrier's strength came from the assumption that all players entered of their own free will, which served as the foundational premise of the ritual. Then came the fourth rule, which stated that players could earn points by eliminating other participants. The fifth rule expanded on this, stating that the number of points awarded for each kill was determined by the game master based on the value of the individual. Generally, sorcerers were worth 5 points, while non-sorcerers were worth just 1. As Megumi processed the growing complexity of the game, he eventually asked about the identity of the game master. Tengen explained that each player would be assigned a shikigami called Kogani. While not a true game master, Kogani acted as the interface between the player and the game, a liaison of sorts. The real game master, in essence, was more like a self-running program governing the entire ritual. Yuji, trying to keep up, listened as Tengen outlined the sixth rule. It allowed a player to spend 100 points to add a new rule to the game. However, existing rules could not be removed. The seventh rule followed, stating that the game master must accept any proposed rule, as long as it did not disrupt the long-term structure of the game. Choso wondered aloud whether the system was fair at all. Tengen responded that, despite its cruelty, the rules applied equally to all players, even Kinjaku. Finally, Tengen explained the eighth rule, which indicated that if a player's score stayed the same for 19 days, they would also be subjected to cursed technique removal.
Stop taking meeting notes and let ClickUp AI Note Taker do it for you. It allows you to focus on your meetings, not your notes. It captures everything.
The thought of having to kill people again made Yuji visibly uncomfortable. But Megumi, noticing his expression, reassured him that he already had a few ideas for how they might clear the game without taking lives. With the rules of the culling game thoroughly reviewed, Maki stepped up to coordinate everyone's roles. Yuki and Choso were already stationed to guard the Tomb of the Star. Maki herself planned to return to the Zenin clan household to retrieve cursed tools from the family's warehouse. After that, she intended to track down Panda and fill him in on everything they'd learned. Yuta, meanwhile, decided to enter a colony immediately. His goal was to gather information before the game escalated too far, although that meant staying out of nearby colonies to avoid the possibility of facing his allies. It also meant he would be out of touch for some time. Maki then assigned Yuji and Megumi their task to find Kinji Hikari, a suspended third-year student from Jujutsu High, and recruit him to their side. With manpower spread thin, they needed all the help they could get. Yuji hesitated, asking if Hikari was truly that strong. Yuta answered without pause, admitting that while Hikari could be moody, once he got fired up, he was even stronger than Yuta himself. With their objectives set, the group departed the Star Tomb, their missions clear, leaving Tengen, Choso, and Yuki behind to guard the heart of it all. The story then shifted to a moment in the past, shortly after Panda's birth, when Masamichi Yaga was confined to a cell before assuming his role as principal of Tokyo Jujutsu High. Within that cold confinement, he was interrogated by Gakuganji, who demanded to know how Yaga had created an artificial corpse like Panda, one that was fully self-sustaining. Typically, cursed corpses required cursed energy from an external sorcerer to remain active, but Panda was an anomaly, the first of his kind to possess his own cursed energy. That fact alone had rattled the higher-ups enough to classify Yaga as a special grade sorcerer, placing an indefinite restraint on him out of fear that he might someday produce an army of autonomous cursed corpses. They wanted answers, and it was Gakuganji who had been tasked with extracting the truth. Yet, even with chains around his freedom and pressure closing in, Yaga remained firm. He claimed ignorance, insisting he did not know anything. Back in the present, Panda was being held in an isolation chamber at Jujutsu High, used as bait in hopes of drawing Principal Yaga out from hiding. However, unexpectedly, Kusakabe appeared. Without hesitation, he freed Panda, repaying a silent debt he had carried for years, one he owed to Yaga. Kusakabe's mind wandered to a time in the past when Yaga had used his technique to create a fully independent cursed corpse named Takaru, modeled after Kusakabe's deceased nephew. That act had breathed new hope into his grieving sister and brought healing in a way words never could. From that moment on, Kusakabe had felt a lasting sense of gratitude toward Yaga. Cutting again to the present, Principal Yaga, now a fugitive following the events of Shibuya, was on the run after an execution order was issued against him. He paid a visit to a hidden location deep within a forest, a quiet place where Yaga offered his farewell to the cursed corpses around him in his own way. He had caught word of Panda's capture and resolved to free him, even if it meant confronting the consequences of his choices. Unaware of Kusakabe's intervention, Principal Yaga headed toward his goal, only to be intercepted by a masked sorcerer bearing a scar across his left eye. The stranger stood in his path and asked where he was going. Realizing a fight might be inevitable, Yaga calmly removed his jacket, replying without hesitation that he was going to see his son. The masked sorcerer remained unmoved by the sentiment. Instead, he reminded Yaga of his pending death sentence, but proposed an alternative, a chance to live in exchange for revealing the secret behind independent cursed corpses. But Yaga's path was not blocked by the masked man alone. Gakuganji soon emerged from the shadows, guitar in hand. A brief confrontation followed, and before long, Gakuganji delivered a fatal strike, leaving Principal Yaga bloodied and dying on the pavement. As he lay there, breaths growing shallow, Yaga unexpectedly began to speak, explaining the method to create independent cursed corpses in clear detail. The revelation left Gakuganji stunned. He couldn't comprehend why Yaga, who had resisted for so long, would choose to reveal everything now when it could no longer save him. Yaga managed a final smirk, whispering that it was a curse he was passing on, from himself to Gakuganji. Soon after, Panda arrived at the scene. What he saw stopped him cold. His father's lifeless body lay crumpled, blood pooling beneath him. Sensing an imminent confrontation, Gakuganji cast aside his guitar, fully expecting Panda to strike back. But to his surprise, Panda walked past him without a word, eyes fixed solely on Yaga's body. Gakuganji, still processing it all, asked why Panda didn't fight back, why he didn't take revenge for his master's death. Panda, voice low with quiet sorrow, explained that he wasn't like humans. He said he understood that the two principals had never truly been enemies, and that Gakuganji had simply followed the higher-ups' orders. Even so, tears rolled down his face as he knelt by Yaga's side. He asked Gakuganji to remember this, that even pandas cry. Far from the grief-stricken grounds where Panda mourned, Maki arrived at the Zenin clan household. As she stepped inside, she was immediately confronted by Naoya, who, with his usual smugness, took one look at her scars and wasted no time mocking her, jeering at her inability to use cursed techniques or even perceive cursed spirits. But his words bounced off her like pebbles against stone. Maki ignored him entirely and made her way underground, where the cursed weapons were stored. She unlocked the gate to the cursed warehouse, only to be greeted not by tools, but by a chilling sight. Inside the dimly lit chamber sat her father, Ogi Zenin, waiting as if he had always known she would come. Not a single cursed weapon was in sight.
Ini
Calmly,
part
almost
favoritku.
smugly, he stated that he had anticipated her arrival and had removed every
Gila,
cursed tool beforehand.
karakter
Beside him,
developmentnya
Mai lay
keren
sprawled on
banget.
the ground, beaten and bleeding. With a pained breath, she called out to Maki, questioning why she had been so reckless to come here alone. Above the chamber, in a secluded room of the estate, Jinichi Zenin sat with Naoya, both deep in discussion over the leadership of the Zenin clan. Jinichi expressed a calculated preference for Megumi as clan head, owing to the boy's ties to Gojo and the Kamo clan, but made it clear he had no intention of letting an outsider inherit the clan's entire fortune. Naoya, ever scheming, suggested they simply get rid of Megumi altogether. but Junichi warned that an outright assassination would risk the clan's relationship with other prominent families, especially given the power vacuum left by Gojo's absence. That fallout could cripple them. Instead, he laid out a more strategic plan. The Jujutsu headquarters had labeled the act of unsealing Gojo as treason. They would use this opportunity to brand Megumi, Maki, and Mai as conspirators attempting to free Gojo and eliminate them under legal sanction. Ogi Zenin would take center stage in this plot, killing his own daughters to fulfill the plan. Naoya found the plan twistedly amusing, but questioned whether his uncle would actually go through with it. To that, Junichi calmly revealed it was Ogi's idea from the very beginning. Meanwhile, back in the underground room, the confrontation between father and daughter had already begun. Ogi activated his hidden technique, Falling Blossom Emotion, his body and blade surging with cursed energy designed to detect and counter any technique. He prepared himself in case Maki wielded a weapon he didn't recognize, and indeed, she did. Maki held in her hand Dragonbone, a cursed tool crafted by Juso Kamiya, capable of absorbing cursed energy on impact and releasing it at will. Her father had no idea of its special properties. She planned to bait him into a clash, exploit his ignorance, and end the fight swiftly. As they faced off, Ogi posed a loaded question. Did she know why his older brother had been chosen clan head over him? Maki's response was blunt, unflinching. She told him it was because their father had been a terrible man, one who didn't hesitate to kill his own children. The words ignited him. In a blur, Ogi lunged, blade drawn in full force. But Maki, matching his speed, met his strike and countered. The cursed energy burst from the back of her blade, shattering his weapon in an instant. She seized the opening, moving behind him to finish it, but Ogi's reflexes kicked in. Spinning around, he slammed his palm into her gut, the force disrupting her organs violently. He followed with another strike, his blade, now bathed in flame, slicing through her already injured eye and tearing deep into her lower abdomen. Dazed, Maki barely registered what had happened until she realized his weapon was no longer physical. His cursed technique had ignited it into raw flame. As she fell, Ogi shed a single tear. His voice was bitter as he answered the question he had asked earlier. He hadn't become clan head, not because he lacked strength, but because his children were worthless. He dragged the broken bodies of his daughters down a dark corridor, their blood leaving a
The
grim
moment
trail
of
behind.
truth.
As he walked, he ranted, insisting that he was not weaker than his brother, only less fortunate in the offspring he had produced. In his eyes, they had been his burden, the weight that held him back. Finally, he arrived at a large training chamber, one meant for disciplining sorcerers. Without ceremony, he threw Maki and Mai down a staircase, into a room teeming with grade 2 and lower cursed spirits waiting to feast. Before leaving, he made sure to offer one last insult. He mocked Maki's strength, calling it unimpressive, noting that any sorcerer could strengthen their body
Dan,
with cursed energy. The
patriarki
heavenly
banget.
restriction, in his view, was nothing special. With that, he turned his back and called them the stains of his life, uttering one final farewell. Alone now, Mai stirred. Somehow she pushed herself up and crawled to her sister's side, checking for a pulse. Finding Maki still alive, she breathed into her mouth, trying to resuscitate her. Suddenly, Maki gasped as if breaking the surface of deep water. She found herself in a dream-like space, a quiet beach, peaceful and surreal. Lying beside her was Mai, who calmly told her that she would now use her construction technique to make something, and that doing so would cost her life. As she began walking toward the sea, Maki shouted after her, confused and
No.
panicked, begging her to return. But Mai, unshaken, explained the cruel truth about their bond. As twins, They were treated as a single sorcerer. As long as both existed, neither could reach their full potential. Maki realized what Mai intended and tried again to stop her, chasing after her into the water. But Mai's hand slipped away as she shared her final words that she would take all the cursed energy between them and leave one gift behind. In exchange, she asked Maki to promise her one thing to destroy everything. As
Damn,
images of their childhood flashed in her
this
mind,
is my
Maki
favorite part.
awoke from the dream. But the reed her sister had given her was gone, replaced by a sword
Let's go, balas
crafted from
dendam.
Mai. Beside her, Mai's body lay still. Maki called out, tears falling freely, but the truth struck her with full force. Her sister was gone. Her grief was interrupted by the sound of cursed spirits rushing in from behind. Elsewhere, Obi Zenon suddenly paused mid-step. A shift in the air pulled his senses toward the training chamber. A gust of wind swept by him, carrying with it an eerie stillness. He noticed the complete absence of cursed energy, realizing with unease that every cursed spirit had vanished without a trace. He turned just in time to see Maki step out of the shadows, carrying her sister's lifeless body. Something about her presence froze him. It was the same
Damn.
suffocating aura he had once felt from Toji Zenon. Fear sliced through him like a blade. Eyes wide with terror, he activated his innate technique, blazing courage, igniting his sword with fierce flame and forming a protective ring of fire. With
Ini
his
mah
weapon raised high,
membangkitkan
he vowed to turn Maki to
demon
ash
anjir.
in one final act of defiance. But before he could register her movement, Maki, now reborn through Mai's sacrifice, blurred past him in a single step. Her strike was instantaneous, cleanly severing her father's head with a slash so swift he never even saw it. Standing over his fallen body, Maki silently stared at the cursed tool Mai had left her. She clenched it with purpose, her grip steady, her heart resolute, to honor the vow made beside her sister on that quiet beach. An alarm rang out across the Zenon household, its shrill tone echoing through the halls. Both Nalia and Junichi heard it clearly and exchanged glances, unsure of what was unfolding outside. Stepping out into the corridor to investigate, they were soon met by a young boy, Ranta, who came rushing toward them, his face pale with shock as he blurted out the news that struck like thunder. Maki had gone mad and killed her father.
Damn.
Junichi froze, stunned by the revelation of Obi Zenon's death. He and Naoya struggled to process the idea that Maki, of all people, had defeated her father, a feat that should have been impossible. To respond swiftly, the Kukuru unit was mobilized. At its helm was Nobuaki Zenon, who took it upon himself to personally eliminate Maki for what he saw as an unforgivable act of treason against the clan. It didn't take long before the squad tracked Maki down. She stood silently in a dim room, both arms equipped with cursed tools and a presence that weighed on the air like a storm about to break. Moving with practiced precision, the Kukuru unit surrounded her from every direction, leaving no route of escape. Fully prepared, the unit launched their coordinated assault, determined to end Maki's rampage then and there. But in that moment, Maki's thoughts wandered to Mai, her final words, her last request, to destroy everything. As that memory jolted through her mind, her eyes snapped wide open, just as one of the men lunged in to strike. With a single fluid movement, she avoided the attack and severed both of his hands effortlessly. Vaulting over his back, Maki descended into chaos, unleashing a merciless killing spree. With brutal precision, she cut down the Kukuru members one after another, legs, torsos, heads.
Brutal
No
banget.
part was spared, as her blades carved a blood-soaked path through her enemies. None of the men stood a chance. Her fury was unrelenting. By the time Captain Nobuaki arrived to assess the situation, the room had already turned into a massacre. His squad was reduced to mangled corpses, and there stood Maki, surrounded by crimson-stained bodies, unfazed amidst the carnage. Suddenly, Maki sensed a shift, an immense surge of cursed energy from below. Massive hands erupted from the ground, slamming together in an attempt to crush her. From above, Nobuaki spotted reinforcements. The hate unit had entered the fray, and leading the charge were Chojuro, Junichi, and Ranta. As
Keren-keren
the
nanti
elite force of the Zenin
brutal
clan,
ini.
the hate unit boasted the clan's most formidable sorcerers. But Maki didn't flinch. She tore through the earthen grip, launching herself straight at Chojuro with lethal intent. The old sorcerer narrowly evaded her strike.
Baru, Costa Max! 2 kali lebih besar, lebih renyah.
Responding with a forceful kick. Nobuaki joined in quickly, the two attempting to pressure Maki with a synchronized assault. Yet Maki, showing neither hesitation nor fatigue, overwhelmed them with blinding speed. In the blink of an eye, she broke through their guard and rammed both her hands into their throats. Blood gushed out as both men collapsed, killed instantly, unable to comprehend the monster Maki had become. As Maki paused, Ranta saw his chance. He activated his paralysis technique, locking her body in place. Shouting desperately, he called out to Junichi, begging him to finish Maki off now. Junichi surged forward, but Maki resisted. Gritting her teeth, she shattered through Ranta's hold,
Ketawa.
unleashing a devastating counter that left his eyes maimed beyond recognition. Still, despite his agony, Ranta raised his voice again. He screamed that Maki had become just like Toji Zenith, but unlike Toji, who never set out to destroy the entire clan, Maki
Anjay.
would. He implored Junichi once
Iyalah, saudaranya meninggal.
claiming it was the only way to stop what was coming.
Dibutain loh.
The moment those words reached Junichi, he launched high into the sky, summoning a flurry of cursed energy-imbued fists that rained down like a meteor storm. The impact decimated the surrounding area. As the dust choked the air, Ranta, bleeding, broken, allowed a faint smile to form, believing they had succeeded in stopping her. His final breath escaped as he succumbed to his injuries, satisfied they'd won. But when the smoke began to clear, a figure emerged. Maki stepped forward unscathed, holding Junichi's
Anjay.
severed head by the hair. At last, Naoya arrived. His eyes took in the carnage, and he stood face to face with Maki. Without restraint, he condemned her cruelty, questioning if she even had a heart left in her. Her face, blank and cold, told him everything. Her heart had been taken long ago. Without further words, Naoya lunged, releasing a barrage of rapid punches within a split second. Maki parried most of them, trying to keep pace and count his movements, but in the blink of an eye, Naoya closed in and grabbed her, triggering his projection sorcery. She froze, locked inside a single frame. Using the opportunity, Naoya hurled her through multiple stone structures that surrounded the Zenin estate. She crashed violently through each one, yet Naoya gave no reprieve. He followed her with relentless speed, landing blow after blow, driving her deeper into the earth. Peering into her eyes, Naoya burned with the belief that Maki could never match Toji Zenith, that she didn't belong in the realm of monsters. He swore he'd prove himself as the true heir to that legacy, one who deserved to stand beside legends like Toji and Gojo, not her. With every strike, Naoya pushed his speed further, building unstoppable momentum. Maki, even with her heightened abilities, found herself lagging behind, silently admitting the tide was turning. She knew she had to act before it was too late. This time, unlike his fight with Choso, Naoya refused to let up. He had learned that true strength was the product of weight and speed, and now, at supersonic velocity, he intended to pierce Maki clean through. But Maki stood undaunted, bracing for the collision,
Anjay.
assumed the Shiranui goddess stance, ready to absorb the full force of his assault, even if it meant cracking her ribs to bring his rampage to a halt. Naoya, however, saw through her intent. Instead of crashing into her directly, he tagged her with his palm mid-attack, activating his cursed technique. Now Maki was bound to the 24 frames per second rule, forced to move rhythmically, or be frozen once more. Still at supersonic speed, Naoya mocked her again, calling her a counterfeit, a poor imitation of Tochi. He moved in for the final strike, confident that she was frozen. But then, Maki moved. She broke the
Damn.
rhythm deliberately, not trapped, but timing her motion perfectly. As Naoya closed in, her fist surged upward, intercepting him with
Dia
brutal
pikir dia lebih
precision.
cepat.
She declared that she understood how projection sorcery worked now. His face rushed toward her knuckles, and in that moment, as Nalia tried to spit out another insult, Maki smashed his face into the ground, leaving him bloodied and broken. And just like that, it was over. Silence descended over the ruins of the
Bonyok.
Zenin compound. The clan had been decimated, their corpses scattered, yet somehow Naoya still clung to life. He dragged his mangled body across the ground, coughing and stumbling until he collapsed through a doorway, landing inside one of the manor's inner rooms. Each breath was a struggle, but a twisted smirk crept onto his face. He mocked Maki for sparing him, proud to still be alive, but his moment of relief shattered as footsteps echoed from behind. Standing in the doorway was Maki's mother. Blood poured from her neck, her throat already slashed. She gripped a kitchen knife tightly. Naoya's eyes widened as he tried to rise, but he was too far gone to summon his cursed energy. The woman stumbled forward and collapsed over him, driving the blade deep into his back with the last of her strength, ending his life with quiet finality. In her final moments, as Maki and Mai's mother drew her last breath, she remembered the daughters she had brought into this world, and for the first time, she found peace, glad to have given birth to them. Outside, with the Zenin clan annihilated, Maki walked away from the estate, carrying Mai's body in her arms. As she descended the steps, a familiar figure raced up toward her. It was Momo Nishimiya. Momo's eyes fell on Mai's lifeless form, and her heart shattered. She had warned Mai not to go, had begged her to stay in Kyoto. Now, overcome with regret, Momo wept uncontrollably, her
Anjir,
cries
sedih
echoing
banget
through
loh.
the ruined compound. Maki handed her
Semua
sister's
karakter
body to Momo,
meninggal
asking
semua.
her to take care of it. In a voice barely audible, Momo asked what Maki would do now. But Maki said nothing. She simply turned away and walked into the distance, gripping Mai's blade tightly in her hand. In the days that followed, the official reports confirmed that every Zenin clan member absent during the massacre died violent deaths under mysterious circumstances. The only trace left behind was the faint residual of a cursed tool. Soon after, the Gojo and Kamo clans jointly proposed the removal of the Zenin from the big three sorcerer families, but Jujutsu headquarters withheld its decision, leaving the verdict suspended, for the world had changed, and one of its most powerful clans had vanished in blood and silence. Meanwhile, elsewhere in Japan, Megumi and Yuji were on the move, following intel from Tengen about Hikari's location. The elusive third year was currently employed as a bookie for an underground fight club operating inside a rundown parking garage in Tochigi Prefecture. The club hosted brutal hand-to-hand matches, often pitting sorcerers against one another, while the majority of spectators remained clueless non-sorcerers who came for the thrill. Disguised as regular civilians, Yuji and Megumi approached the garage's ground-level entrance, only to be stopped by a scowling manager and a burly bodyguard. The latter immediately warned them to leave before they got beaten and bloody. Yuji looked annoyed at the threat, but Megumi stood composed, calmly stating their desire to join the gambling matches to earn some cash. Unimpressed, the bodyguard drew back a heavy right hook aimed at Megumi, but halted just before impact. Pulling back his fist, he growled that the first rule of the club was to never talk about it, demanding to know how they'd even heard of the place. Unfazed, Megumi lied without a twitch, claiming he'd heard about it from a man he killed a month ago. The manager at the back perked up, suspecting the boy might have killed Kondo, one of their men who had mysteriously vanished. Megumi pressed forward, offering to take Kondo's place and threatened to flatten the bodyguard if they declined. Just then, the manager received a call. After a brief exchange, he informed them that the boss had approved Megumi's offer, but on one condition. Yuji would fight in the matches, not Megumi. The pair accepted the terms without protest and quietly left the garage. Later that evening, Yuji returned alone and was met by the same bodyguard who laid out the rules of the fight club. There were only two: no running from the fight and no use of cursed techniques. When Yuji asked why, the bodyguard explained that since most of the audience couldn't perceive cursed energy, flashy supernatural moves would make the matches boring, and running away only ruined the spectacle. Fights were for show, and the audience demanded a front row seat to the chaos. As they descended the stairs toward the arena, Yuji asked about the boss. The guard, not revealing much, hinted that Yuji might get the chance to meet him, depending on his performance tonight. He elaborated further, mentioning there were two types of fights: scripted and unscripted. The boss personally wrote the former, and if Yuji impressed in the latter, he might earn the chance to be featured. Excited by the possibility of reaching Hikari, Yuji prepared himself to give the audience a match they wouldn't forget. The arena was already buzzing with life when Yuji stepped in. Crowds surrounded the makeshift battleground, roaring with anticipation. The announcer's voice rang out through the speaker system, introducing the night's fighters. On one side, the newcomer Yuji Itadori, and on the other, none other than Panda. Elsewhere, on the rooftop monitor room, Hikari lounged with his associate, watching the screens with mild disinterest. He complained that the excitement had dried up lately, that predetermined fights lacked spice, and confidently stated that Panda wouldn't lose. But his associate quickly urged him to look closer at the screen, where Yuji was exceeding expectations with each passing second. The fight between Yuji and Panda became a spectacle in itself. The announcer, still new to the job, couldn't believe his luck witnessing such a match, claiming it was the best he'd ever called. The two fighters threw convincing blows, exchanging fake hits while putting on a show that had the entire arena on its feet. Midway through their mock battle, Yuji asked Panda under his breath if he'd met Hikari. Panda shook his head, saying he hadn't, but mentioned that Hikari hadn't suspected him of anything. Still, he warned Yuji to be careful around the other third year. Panda then questioned if Yuji had revealed his Jujutsu High affiliation. Yuji confirmed that he hadn't. With the crowd roaring, Panda signaled it was time to end the act. Yuji landed a solid body blow, and Panda responded with an exaggerated reaction, collapsing dramatically to sell the performance. The announcer declared Yuji the winner, and the audience cheered for the newcomer. Impressed, Hikari contacted one of his managers and demanded that Yuji be brought to his office immediately. He wanted to write him into a new fight script and couldn't wait to get started. The other third year, Kirara Hoshi, expressed skepticism, dismissing Hikari's excitement as absurd and the plan itself as foolish. As Hikari spoke about Yuji, his associate on the phone asked what to do about the other boy, referring to Megumi. Hikari ordered Kirara to keep an eye on him and to remain alert. While Hikari became increasingly intrigued with Yuji's potential, Panda had already exited the garage to regroup with Megumi, who was waiting in a nearby forest. He asked if Megumi thought Yuji would be able to reach Hikari. Megumi believed so, but raised a concern. If Panda was already inside the club, why hadn't he met Hikari yet? Panda explained that Hikari operated from the rooftop monitoring room, but no matter how close he tried to get to the door, the distance never closed. Whether walking or running, it was like an invisible barrier held him back. It reminded him of Gojo's infinity, though he suspected it was Kirara's curse technique at work. Megumi asked if the phenomenon only occurred when Kirara was inside the room. Panda admitted he wasn't sure since Kirara had never left Hikari's side. Despite their concerns, Panda felt Yuji might still win Hikari over with his charm, though he was worried about Yuji's poor lying skills. Rather than forcing a confrontation, Panda proposed quietly, subduing the guards near the monitor room to avoid any interruptions once Yuji got in. Megumi agreed and decided to handle the guards himself, though he feared that Hikari might catch them via the surveillance system. Panda reassured him, having studied the building long enough to memorize all camera placements and blind spots. Satisfied, Megumi acknowledged that their plan had potential, but warned that Kurara's curse technique still remained a dangerous unknown. If things went south, they would have to pull back. With Yuji already heading up alongside Kurara, Megumi infiltrated the building by hiding inside a guard's shadow. In a swift motion, he emerged and choked the man unconscious, gagging and zip-tying him before slipping away. A second guard wandered by unknowingly and met the same fate, subdued silently with a triangle choke inside the blind spot. At the same time, on the other side of the building, two guards spotted Panda playing with a tire, but didn't pay it much mind. One wondered if he'd eat fish sausage, while the other recognized him from an earlier match. Before either could react, Panda knocked them both out and casually took the sausage before heading up the emergency stairs. Soon, Panda met with Megumi on the roof and assured him any trouble caused could be cleaned up later. But just as they turned to approach the monitor room, they spotted Kurara emerging from a level below, no longer inside the room with Hikari. Both were caught off guard by this sudden change. Kurara immediately noticed the pair and recognized Megumi from the security feed. Realizing that both were from Jujutsu High, she moved to alert Hikari. Reaching for her phone, Kurara prepared to make the call, but Megumi acted fast, summoning Divine Dog to intercept. The Shikigami lunged to restrain her, but the moment it touched Kurara, it was repelled and flung back toward Megumi. Stunned, Megumi realized something was wrong. He hadn't expected Divine Dog to be so violently rejected. Before he could process it fully, Kurara bolted toward the monitor room. Panda tried to reason with her, insisting they weren't enemies, but Kurara didn't believe it. Her expression darkened with hurt, feeling betrayed by Panda's involvement. Despite Panda's efforts, he couldn't catch up. Kurara's curse technique made it impossible. So, Megumi commanded the Divine Dog to block her path again, and though it succeeded, something unexpected happened. Megumi was pulled forward alongside his Shikigami. It became clear to him then that Kurara's technique not only restricted proximity, but created a binding link. He couldn't approach nor retreat from Divine Dog anymore. As Megumi reeled from this realization, inside the monitor room, Yuji stood face to face with Kinji Hikari for the first time. Without wasting time on pleasantries, Hikari got straight to the point and asked Yuji if he believed it was possible to earn 1,000,000 yen by working just 1 hour a day. Caught off guard, Yuji hesitantly asked what kind of work he was talking about, to which Hikari launched into a passionate explanation about his obsession with gambling, what he called the fever. Hikari confessed that he wanted to spread this fever across the entire country using his fight club. With the truth about cursed spirits now public and inevitable changes coming to jujutsu regulations, he intended to ride the tide and expand his underground operation. But to do that, he needed powerful allies. So he extended an invitation to Yuji, asking if he wanted to get high on the fever with him. Yuji, still unsure, was about to mention Jujutsu High and asked for help when a phone call interrupted them. Hikari, unconcerned, let it ring out and instead offered Yuji a drink. Yuji accepted the gesture with sincerity, but clarified that he didn't drink alcohol since he was underage. That made Hikari chuckle, and he brought up Gojo's name, asking if Yuji knew that even the great sorcerer wasn't fond of alcohol. Yuji paused briefly before replying that he didn't know who Gojo was. That answer immediately raised a red flag for Hikari, who responded sharply that there wasn't a single sorcerer who didn't know Gojo. Finishing his drink, he slammed the glass onto the table and, growing increasingly suspicious, demanded to know if Yuji was a spy from Jujutsu Hana. Before Yuji could defend himself, Hikari hurled the glass straight at his face. Yuji instinctively deflected it, but Hikari was already in motion, activating his first two tall sliding doors materialized out of thin air, attempting to close in and trap Yuji. Reacting on instinct, Yuji leapt above the converging doors and tried to speak, but Hikari didn't let up. Launching a brutal jab at Yuji's face, followed by a swift kick to his chin,
Ya.
Hikari explained that a call from Kurara meant something wasn't right. He kept the pressure on, forcing Yuji on the defensive until Yuji, recalling Megumi's advice, retaliated with a headbutt and begged him to listen. But Hikari, unwilling to take chances, refused to back down. Elsewhere, on the rooftop, Kurara's curse technique had stalled both Panda and Megumi in a tense deadlock. Seizing the moment, Megumi attempted to reason with her, explaining that they weren't acting under Jujutsu High's authority, but had come to ask for help against the Jujutsu terrorism unfolding in Tokyo. Kurara remained unmoved, replying that Jujutsu High deserved everything they were getting since they had abandoned her and Hikari. Puzzled by her hostility, Megumi asked what exactly had happened to make her feel so betrayed by the higher-ups. Panda offered insight, revealing that the conservatives within the Jujutsu world clung to traditional ways, while Hikari tried blending Jujutsu with technology, a conflict that ultimately caused a major rift. Kurara, unconvinced, retorted that Jujutsu High always had their priorities backwards and only leaned on Gojo to clean up their mess. So why ask for help now? Without hesitation, Megumi revealed that Gojo had been sealed, but instead of showing concern, Kurara wore a look of comic disbelief, clearly not taking his words seriously. Realizing reason wouldn't work, Megumi activated Rabbit Escape, summoning a massive rabbit Shikigami across the rooftop. He and Panda knew that subduing Kurara would be key to negotiating with Hikari, and this was their best shot. But as his Shikigami scattered, Megumi noticed something odd. Each rabbit bore a symbol labeled Acrox. Shifting his focus to the manga room door, he spotted another symbol, Dacrox. The rabbits dispersed, allowing Megumi to observe which areas they could approach and which they couldn't. Kurara, clearly confused, wondered aloud why he summoned so many rabbits, then explained that her innate cursed technique marked cursed energy the same way it did sorcerers, making the rabbits valid targets. She warned that if this continued, all the rabbits would converge on Megumi and suffocate him. But to her surprise, Megumi dispelled all of them in a single moment. Then, turning to Panda, he asked which parts of the rooftop the rabbits had approached and which they hadn't. Panda confirmed that the Shikigami were drawn to him and the second floor, but could not get near Kurara or the monitor room. Acting quickly, Megumi asked Panda to check if he had any markings on him. After a brief look, Panda found a symbol on his body that read, Imai. Megumi examined himself as well and discovered the same symbol that had appeared on the rabbits. Putting the pieces together, Megumi deduced that Kurara's curse technique was based on the Southern Cross constellation, and her startled reaction confirmed it. Frustrated that her secret had been exposed, Kurara grew desperate. The thought of Megumi fully unraveling her technique and reaching the monitor room unsettled her, so she made up her mind to stop him at any cost. Megumi silently thanked his sister for teaching him about the constellation, but still found gaps in his knowledge. He assumed at first that each person had been assigned one of the Southern Cross's stars to keep them separated, but the situation didn't match that theory. Kurara could reach the door, and Megumi and Panda could approach one another. This led him to suspect that her technique functioned more like a board game, where movement followed a specific route or order between the marked stars. Panda speculated that the technique might exclude the caster entirely, but Megumi recalled how Divine Dog had failed to reach Kurara, disproving that idea. Panda then suggested that maybe the stars repelled each other, but Megumi dismissed the idea again, pointing out that if both Kurara and the door repelled him and Panda, she could have simply fled into the monitor room. Instead, she stayed outside, blocking them from fulfilling some condition that would let them enter. Megumi realized the constellation must consist of 5 or more stars. If there were only 4, one of them should have been able to reach Kurara, which hadn't happened. That meant there had to be a 5th point between them, a crucial step in the route. Their discussion was suddenly interrupted as Kurara leapt atop a car and marked it with Imai, sending it flying toward Panda. Vehicle flipped in midair, but Panda barely caught it and reassured Megumi he was fine, urging him to find the missing star. As Megumi searched, he speculated that the marks were made not by touch, but through cursed energy. Since Kirara never physically touched him, she could mark cursed energy itself. He also deduced she needed to charge objects with someone else's cursed energy first. He looked for residual traces and found some that didn't belong to Kirara on the car. Assuming her technique had limited range, he scanned the area and eventually spotted a parking stop labeled Mimosa, the 5th star. Touching it confirmed there were no other cursed energy trails. Since Kirara herself already had a star mark, Megumi assumed she couldn't apply another mark using her own energy. But just as he relaxed, multiple objects marked Akrox came flying at him. It was then revealed that Megumi's entire theory was mostly correct. Kirara's cursed technique, Love Rendezvous, marked 5 stars resembling the Southern Cross on
Pinter
sources of cursed
banget.
energy. To approach another star, one had to follow a fixed sequential path. Without following that order, objects with matching stars would be pulled in and attracted to each other. The order followed the stars from nearest to farthest, and since Megumi was marked with Acrux, he had to pass through the parking stop and Kirara to reach the monitor room door. Kirara praised his deduction, but noted he made one mistake, assuming she couldn't throw more objects. While she couldn't mark her cursed energy, with more than one star at a time, she could simply remove the mark from herself and reapply it to other objects. But just when she thought she had cornered him, Divine Dog reappeared behind her and immobilized her on the spot. Kirara, stunned, realized that Megumi had never actually dispelled his Shikigami. He had predicted which matching stars would attract each other and positioned a wall between them. Then, he waited until Kirara stood directly between the two before releasing Divine Dog from the wall, allowing it to approach her. With Divine Dog dragging her straight to Megumi, Kirara was forced to cancel her cursed technique, and Megumi, quick to act, immediately pinned her to the ground. But instead of using the moment to press on or punish her, Megumi let her go. Kirara sat up, confused, and found Megumi kneeling, bowing, and sincerely begging her to listen to what he had to say. Seeing his earnest plea, Kirara finally relented and agreed to hear him out. But
Lucu
before Megumi
banget.
could speak, the monitor room door suddenly blasted off its hinges, and Yuji came flying out with it. Startled, Megumi turned just in time to see Hikari step out of the room, irritation clear on his face. With the tension escalating, Yuji swiftly turned to Megumi and Panda, firmly instructing them not to interfere. The directness of his words struck Hikari the wrong way, making him believe he was being underestimated. Scoffing at the perceived arrogance, Hikari didn't hold back. He surged forward and landed a devastating punch square on Yuji's face, sending the first year hurtling across the rooftop. But Yuji didn't stay down. Blood streamed from his nose as he quickly rose to his feet, unwavering. In his mind, he had already resolved not to dodge or fight back. At least, not until Hikari gave him a chance to speak. The sight of Yuji standing tall, despite the blow, made Hikari pause in brief surprise, noting that Yuji had deliberately taken the hit without resistance.
Damn.
Intrigued but not yet convinced, Hikari gave Yuji a condition. He'd listen to whatever he had to say, but only if he could remain standing for as long as possible. With that, Hikari flared his cursed energy and delivered a second punch, then followed it with an even harder blow that launched Yuji across the roof, crashing him into a nearby wall. Checking if the boy was finally down for good, Hikari turned to the others and barked at them to take their subordinate and leave. But before he could finish his sentence, Yuji reemerged behind him. Hikari instinctively backed up, genuinely stunned at how Yuji was still standing after enduring 3 full-force blows without defending himself. Looking into Yuji's eyes, he saw something different now, a spark, a fever that echoed his own. Realizing Yuji wasn't here to bluff or posture, Hikari finally agreed to listen. He told Megumi and Panda to come down so they could talk properly and cut a deal. Once seated, Megumi wasted no time in breaking the news that Gojo had been sealed. Hikari stared blankly, processing the impossible. For a moment, the usually brash third year was at a loss for words, and before he could fully recover, Panda added that Principal Yaga had been killed by one of the higher-ups. The revelation hit hard, especially for Panda, who viewed Yaga as a father. But Panda kept a strong front, assuring the others he was all right. Hikari slumped back, visibly bummed, reflecting that everyone who'd ever taken care of him was now gone. But pushing his emotions aside, he got down to business. He agreed to help in the culling game, though not out of loyalty or obligation, but as part of a deal. If he helped them now, they'd owe him in the future. Panda responded without hesitation, stating that with the current upheaval, reforms to the jujutsu regulations were inevitable. Still, he pressed Hikari for what exactly he wanted out of the bargain. Megumi spoke up, adding that he doubted Hikari's request would be particularly difficult to fulfill. Hikari, irritated by the assumption, snapped at Megumi, demanding to know what he could possibly understand about the situation.
Wait.
Megumi revealed that he was now the head of the Zenin clan. The revelation left Hikari speechless, more shocked by this than even the news about Gojo or Yaga. With the backing of the big 3 families, Hikari realized that changing the system might genuinely be within reach. Seizing the moment, he dropped his guard and extended an olive branch,
So cute.
supposing they'd be friends. Megumi gave a simple nod, accepting the offer. With everyone now on the same page, Yuji shifted the conversation to their next move, noting they still needed to decide which colony each person would enter. But before the discussion could go further, a sudden ringing echoed in the air, and Kogani appeared above Yuji, startling them all. In a loud voice, Kugani announced the addition of a new rule to the culling game, allowing players to access detailed information about other participants, including their name, points, number of rules added, and current colony. It further revealed that this new rule had been added by Hajime Kashimo, an elite level sorcerer currently dominating the Tokyo number 2 colony. Following the announcement, Kugane formally introduced itself as the liaison assigned to Yuji. This shocked Megumi, who couldn't understand why Yuji was already recognized as a player despite not having entered a colony. Yuji suspected it might be related to Sukuna, but even he wasn't certain. Still, they tabled that question for the moment. Yuji promptly commanded Kugane to display the participant list. As Megumi scrolled through the data, he quickly spotted Kashimo's name and identified him as the player responsible for the latest rule change. Studying the screen intently, Megumi realized this update could change everything. If they could find someone with enough points, they might be able to avoid killing anyone by convincing or forcing that player to add rules. With this, the team now had a clear plan of action. Their top priority was locating Angel, who was said to possess the ability to unseal the prison realm. Their second objective was to target high point players, those who had the leverage to alter the game. And at that moment, the two individuals who fit that description were Hajime Kashimo and Hiromi Higuruma. The story rewound a few days earlier to the early phase of the culling game. In Sendai City, Kenjaku was seen escorting Setsuko, Yuji's high school friend, safely out of the barrier. Their exchange was brief but haunting, as before disappearing into the shadows, Kenjaku expressed gratitude for Setsuko's kindness toward his son. Back in the present, Yuji and Megumi regrouped with their allies, combing through the player registry in search of Angel. Her name, however, was nowhere to be found. Panda speculated she might be using an alias, comparing it to Sukuna's vessel carrying the name Yuji. Megumi recalled Master Tengen's revelation that Angel resided in the Tokyo number 2 colony, confirming their lead. Knowing time was slipping away, Akari quickly decided to head for Tokyo number 2 colony with Panda to search for Angel, while Yuji and Megumi would enter Tokyo number 1 colony to find Higuruma. Kurara stayed behind, tasked with monitoring events outside for any updates or unexpected changes. Hikari took it upon himself to handle Hajime Kashimo, reasoning that the high score player was likely the most dangerous, and Panda's sharp sense of smell would be essential for locally the most dangerous, and Panda's sharp reasoning that the high score player was likely the most dangerous, and Panda's sharp sense of smell would be essential for locating Angel within the sprawling colony. By the next day, all four reached their respective colony barriers. As expected, Kugani appeared and posed the standard question whether they were ready to enter and declare participation in the culling game. Without hesitation, Hikari, Panda, Yuji, and Megumi accepted, crossing the threshold in unison and setting their operation into motion. The moment Yuji and Megumi stepped inside the barrier, they were immediately separated, sent to different locations. Yuji, falling freely from the sky, looked around in confusion, wondering where Megumi was. It was explained that upon entering a barrier, players were transferred to one of 9 specific locations. Certain individuals stationed themselves at these points to take advantage of disoriented newcomers. On the ground, a boy named Rinamai noticed Yuji plummeting from above and began signaling with a guiding light baton toward his partner, Hanyu. Without giving Yuji time to react, Hanyu propelled herself with her cursed technique at high speed, ramming into him directly. She smashed him through 2 buildings, an attack that would have crushed most opponents. But Yuji emerged unscathed, recovering midair and landing atop a building, ready for combat. Hanyu recognized his resilience and called for backup, but Yuji acted faster, hurling a rock that struck her lower abdomen, injuring her and forcing her to crash into a building below. Yuji was surprised by how easily she was brought down, though he still needed to ask about Higuruma and locate Megumi. Before he could, another figure appeared, Haba, furious over the attack on her partner. From afar, Rin watched the events unfold, recognizing the new arrival. After a moment, he realized Yuji was someone from his past. Meanwhile, in another part of Tokyo #1 colony, Megumi engaged another player, swiftly defeating her after she attempted an ambush. As the female player sobbed in frustration, Megumi lamented being separated from Yuji and was frustrated that even his Shikigami couldn't locate him. Regardless, he pressed forward, demanding information on Higuruma. The girl, however, played coy, saying she would reveal it only if Megumi acted as her knight and escorted her. Reluctantly, Megumi agreed, warning her that lies would not go unpunished. She only smirked and introduced herself as Remy. Back at Yuji's location, the fight escalated. Yuji ran across the rooftop, leaping high and grabbing Haba's leg mid-flight. Using his strength, he slammed him down along a high-rise, crashing through its walls. Haba quickly recovered and attempted a counterattack, but Yuji dodged, luring him indoors to take advantage of his over-reliance on propellers. Just as Yuji planned, Haba followed, confident his propellers could shred anything. Spinning at high speed, he charged headfirst like a drill. Yuji braced himself, aiming for a precise strike. As Haba rushed in, Yuji punched him directly atop the head, stopping his spin and splitting it open. Even bleeding heavily with his propeller destroyed, Haba laughed, assuming Yuji had broken his hand from the impact and declaring himself the victor. Yuji didn't falter, delivering a devastating kick to Haba's stomach, knocking him unconscious. Still seeking answers, Yuji asked about Higuruma, unaware his opponent was already out cold. It was then Rin appeared, claiming to know the player Yuji sought. Yuji, not recognizing him, asked who he was, and Rin referred to him by his old nickname from West Junior High. Embarrassed, Yuji realized Rin was from his hometown. Meanwhile, Megumi continued to follow Remy through the streets, acting as her knight. His patience wore thin, and he eventually stopped her, demanding Higuruma's location. At the same time, Rin led Yuji toward Higuruma as well. Both Rin and Remy revealed Higuruma's whereabouts at the same moment to Yuji and Megumi respectively, but named two different locations. Rin claimed Higuruma was in Ikebukuro, while Remy claimed he was in Shinjuku. Yuji and Megumi both set out, each hoping the other was headed to the true destination. Neither realized one of them was being led astray toward a man surrounded by piles of receipt papers. Moments later, Rin and Yuji arrived at a theater in Ikebukuro, where Rin claimed Higuruma was based. Relieved to have reached the target quickly, Yuji thanked Rin and prepared to go inside. Rin hesitated, warning that Higuruma was a dangerous man who had once beaten Haba badly. But Yuji, unfazed, assured him he could escape if things went wrong and stepped inside without hesitation. In the theater, Yuji was surprised to see a bathtub filled with water at the center of the stage, with Higuruma sitting inside fully clothed. Sensing something unusual, Yuji realized Higuruma wasn't an incarnated sorcerer from the past. Pushing aside the thought, Yuji went straight to the point, explaining that he and his allies wanted to end the culling game and that Higuruma could help by adding a new rule using his 100 points. Higuruma bluntly refused, saying the culling game presented opportunities he found interesting. The game's mechanics of punishing rule breakers without charges, prosecutions, or trials appealed to him, even if imperfect. He wished to preserve its structure rather than see it end. Running out of options, Yuji hardened his resolve and demanded the points again. Higuruma, his patience thinning, stepped out of the tub, gavel in hand, as his Shikigami appeared at his side. Without warning, he activated his domain expansion, Deadly Sentencing. The surroundings warped into a courtroom, guillotines looming in the background as the trial began. Alert to the imminent danger, Yuji dashed forward, attempting to strike before Higuruma's cursed technique fully activated. His head kick was fast, but it froze midair, stopping just before connecting. Confused, Yuji quickly realized something was off. Higuruma, calm and composed, explained that his domain prohibited physical violence from either side. Verbal arguments, however, were another matter entirely. In the next moment, Yuji found himself pulled back to his end of the courtroom. Judgment, the Shikigami, floated forward to announce the charges. Yuji was accused of entering a pachinko parlor while underage. At first, Yuji was confused by the accusation until memory surfaced of the parlor in question. Hiding recognition from his expression, he pretended to still be thinking. Higuruma explained that Judgment possessed full knowledge of everyone within the domain, and the verdict would be decided entirely by the arguments presented in court. He presented a file.
Koko latte. Beda rasa, beda cerita.
Evidence submitted for deliberation. Though not conclusive on its own, Higuruma stated that Yuji's defense needed to remove all reasonable doubt if he hoped for an innocent verdict. Understanding the situation, Yuji realized he was being prosecuted by a lawyer wielding a trial-based cursed technique. The lack of direct physical attacks made him recall Tengen's words. That domain expansion was more common among ancient sorcerers because it carried sure hit and sure kill effects. In modern times, constructing a lethal domain was far more difficult, so most domains retained only the sure hit element. In this case, Yuji surmised Higuruma's domain was sure hit type. It was not inherently lethal and couldn't harm him physically. Its effectiveness relied entirely on the rules Higuruma had outlined. Higuruma continued, clarifying that both parties had a single chance to make their statement. Yuji would present his plea, then Higuruma would rebuttal based on the evidence. Judgment would then deliver the verdict. When Yuji asked what would happen if found guilty, Higuruma avoided a direct answer, instead outlining three possible responses: remain silent, confess, or deny with a false statement. With the rules laid out, Higuruma urged Yuji to begin, warning that Judgment was impatient. Yuji took a moment to consider. He remembered clearly that he had entered the pachinko parlor that day, even winning on the machines. Lying seemed to be his only way out, but he didn't know exactly what evidence was in play. After brief deliberation, he claimed he had only gone inside to use the restroom. Higuruma countered immediately, presenting the evidence: a photograph of Yuji inside the parlor exchanging cash. Paired with Yuji's own admission of entering, his restroom excuse collapsed under scrutiny. The verdict came swiftly. Judgment declared Yuji guilty, sentencing him to confiscation. Suddenly, the domain dispersed, the Shikigami fading away. Yuji didn't feel much different until Higuruma hurled his gavel. The impact slammed into Yuji's arm, pain erupting far more sharply than expected. Before Yuji could recover, Higuruma closed the distance, recalling his gavel to hand. Enlarging it and charging it with cursed energy, he brought it down hard, breaking through Yuji's guard and sending him crashing through the theater seats. Yuji rose quickly, but now realized a critical problem. He could no longer manipulate cursed energy. Still, he pressed forward, relying on his raw physical strength. Higuruma advanced, his gavel smashing down in relentless swings. Yuji leapt back, avoiding the strikes, countering with an elbow strike. But in an instant, Higuruma transformed the gavel into a hook, looping it around Yuji's inner elbow before tossing him aside. Pausing mid-fight, Higuruma asked if Yuji truly couldn't control his cursed energy. Yuji was baffled. Higuruma was the cause of it. But Higuruma clarified the nature of confiscation. The penalty was meant to remove an opponent's cursed technique. Since Yuji had none, The effect had stripped him of cursed energy control entirely. This was unusual. Most opponents simply had their technique disabled, weakening their energy manipulation. Losing cursed energy altogether was far worse, yet Yuji still fought on. It marked him as a serious threat. Determined, Higuruma shifted the gavel into his staff, launching into a flurry of swings. Yuji avoided the strikes, grabbing the staff's middle section to disrupt his offense. But the weapon vanished before Yuji could wrench it free. Undeterred, Yuji leapt back and kicked the bathtub toward Higuruma. The player shattered it apart with his gavel, sending water and debris surging forward. Yuji shielded his face from the spray, and in that instant, Higuruma surged through the cascading water, his gavel swelling to massive size before slamming down on Yuji. The impact was crushing. Yuji strained beneath the weight, barely able to hold it back. His muscles trembled, and he realized he couldn't keep it up much longer. Desperate, Yuji searched for a weakness, running through everything he had observed about Higuruma's technique. Then, a spark. One key detail from earlier came to mind. Before the weight could crush him, Yuji called out for a retrial. Instantly, they were transported back into the domain. Yuji felt relief wash over him. The no violence rule here meant he was safe from immediate harm. Higuruma looked at him with a trace of admiration, noting that Yuji was beginning to understand the nature of his technique. Yuji realized the judgeman's guilty verdict and sentencing gave him the right to call for a retrial if he had not confessed outright. The next trial commenced instantly. Judgeman's voice cut through the courtroom. Announcing the charge, Yuji was accused of mass murder in Shibuya. Higuruma received the accompanying evidence, but before he could even speak, Yuji immediately admitted guilt. His confession came without hesitation, refusing to deny or twist the truth. It left Higuruma stunned. This was the same person who had called for a retrial, yet now accepted blame so openly. Yuji's admission drew an even sharper reaction from Judgment. The Shikigami's eyes bled as it seethed with rage, declaring Yuji guilty and sentencing him to death. The verdict carried the additional penalty of confiscation. It was the harshest judgment possible. Higuruma's gavel morphed into the executioner's sword, a weapon capable of killing with a single cut, without exception. But rather than meet the blade head-on, Yuji created a diversion. He hurled theater chairs in rapid succession, forcing Higuruma to deflect. He flung his jujutsu high jacket to obscure the warrior's vision, circling to attack from behind. A sweeping kick came close, but Higuruma sensed the movement and evaded just in time. With the executioner's sword in hand, Higuruma now held the clear advantage. He moved in for a finishing strike, but then faltered. His thoughts lingered on the trial. Why had Yuji confessed? The evidence presented had clearly shown Sukuna as the perpetrator. Yuji had not willingly surrendered control during Shibuya, and Higuruma knew it. The admission didn't make sense. Caught between his own reasoning and Yuji's words, Higuruma hesitated. In a sudden decision, he deactivated the executioner's sword entirely. That opening allowed Yuji to land a heavy uppercut, driving Higuruma back into the rows of seats. Yuji stood still, confused by the shift. Higuruma rose slowly, declaring that Yuji was innocent, that he did not commit the massacre because the control was stolen by Sukuna. But Yuji rejected the reasoning. In his mind, the deaths occurred because he had been too weak to prevent them, and weakness still made him responsible. Higuruma, recognizing the weight of Yuji's conviction, no longer pressed the matter. He invited Yuji to sit, deciding there was no need for further conflict. Once seated, Higuruma addressed his Kogani directly, adding a new rule to the culling game. Players could now transfer points to one another. Yuji waited anxiously as Kogani relayed the request to the game master and confirmed its approval. With the rule in place, Higuruma transferred 1 point to Yuji, ensuring that neither would face cursed technique removal for the next 19 days. Business concluded, Higuruma rose and made for the theater exit. Yuji asked if he would help them continue fighting in the culling game, but Higuruma explained he had killed a judge and a prosecutor before entering Tokyo Colony. He intended to turn himself in once the barrier fell. For now, he would decide his own path. Remaining near Yuji, he reasoned, would only deepen his self-loathing. Leaving those words behind, Higuruma departed, leaving Yuji in the quiet of the empty theater. Yuji had achieved his goal, yet the weight of the exchange lingered. While Yuji's mission succeeded, elsewhere in Tokyo, number 1 colony, Megumi was less fortunate. Following Remi's lead, he found himself not before Higuruma, but standing across from a sorcerer named Reggie. Deceived, anger tightened in his chest. Without hesitation, Megumi summoned Divine Dog, ready for battle, but Reggie merely clapped, remarking on Megumi's strength based on his Shikigami. Seeing potential, Reggie proposed that Megumi join his group, then asked how much he knew of the culling game. Megumi answered that it was a ritual to use the cursed energy of participants to bring people of Japan to the other side, stripping them of humanity. Reggie chuckled, questioning whether Megumi truly understood Kenjaku's role. The mention caught Megumi off guard, but Reggie continued, suggesting the stated ritual was just a facade for Kenjaku's real plan. He offered 3 reasons: the number of players, the varying skill levels, and the game's rules. Reggie believed only the strongest players would survive the early phases. The logic aligned with what Megumi had seen. The Tokyo number 1 colony had been unusually quiet. He realized the game was nearing deadlock, and Reggie confirmed this, noting it had already happened in both Tokyo colonies. Reggie was convinced the permanence of the culling game was a cover. Once it served its purpose, Kenjaku would deliver a devastating blow to the remaining players. Unsure what form it would take, Reggie was focused on gathering allies and stockpiling points. Megumi asked if the combined points of Reggie's group reached 100. Reggie confirmed they did. Megumi replied that a new rule would soon allow point transfers, demanding they hand over their points before he'd consider joining. Reggie refused, declaring the negotiations over. At that moment, Chizuru, one of his allies, attacked from behind, slashing with clawed hands. Anticipating the strike, Megumi slipped into Chizuru's shadow, reappearing in an instant. He seized Chizuru, throwing him over the building's edge. Nue swooped down, dive-bombing, and slamming Chizuru into the ground below. Turning back, Megumi found Divine Dog incapacitated and Reggie unharmed. Reggie remarked on Megumi's restraint, warning that hesitation would get him killed. Before Megumi could answer, he noticed a detached eye fall nearby. It exploded on contact. Another ally, Yori, was above them, grinning as he plucked his own teeth, ready to throw them as bombs. Megumi escaped the smoke, but another attack came instantly. Remi lunged, her hair like a scorpion's stinger. Megumi caught it, slamming her into the ground. From above, Yori swung down, tossing more teeth like projectiles. Reggie followed by scattering receipts, which transformed into gasoline and doused Megumi. Yori's projectiles ignited the fuel, triggering a massive blast that tore through the rooftop in a surge of fire and smoke. When the smoke and dust began to clear, Reggie assumed Megumi was finished. Yori, however, corrected him. The first year had slipped into another room, avoiding the brunt of the blast. Down the corridor, Megumi, battered but standing, pushed a fallen door off himself. His eyes briefly met Remi's, who had been caught in the same blast. Coldly, he warned her that those explosions could have killed her without a second thought, a reminder she was little more than expendable collateral to her so-called allies. Megumi turned to leave, but Remi's hair lashed forward, stabbing into his back. Her voice, desperate, begged him to say he liked her, to promise he would protect her. Disgust twisted across Megumi's face as he despised Remy for clinging to empty words rather than real actions. Just then, Chizuru reappeared, having survived his earlier fall. He smirked, conceding that Megumi had held the advantage before. Now, with Chizuru back, the fight shifted into a 4 against 1. Megumi was at a severe disadvantage, but his determination to claim their points did not falter. Suddenly, Kugani popped out, announcing the addition of the new rule. Points could now be transferred between players. The confirmation brought a sharp smile to Megumi's face. Yuji had done his part. Without hesitation, Megumi drove a back kick into Chizuru while the latter was distracted. Capitalizing on the opening, he summoned Max Elephant, forcing Chizuru out of the building. Grabbing onto Nue, Megumi swooped down, caught Chizuru mid-air by the legs, then drew his sword and slammed the hilt into his face, sending him crashing to the ground. Wounded and cursing, Chizuru tried to rise, only for Megumi to slash his face open, eliminating him from the game. As blood spattered, Megumi briefly questioned his actions, but when Kogani rewarded him with 5 points, he reminded himself to face each difficulty as it came. Moments later, Reggie and Yori descended to ground level. Remy was nowhere to be seen, but Megumi remained outnumbered, the strain from the first explosion weighing on his body. He briefly considered using his incomplete domain expansion, but decided against it for now. His thoughts were interrupted when Iori spat out another tooth, ready to explode. But before it could reach Megumi, someone stepped in front of him, shielding him from the blast. Everyone turned. The newcomer hadn't even introduced himself before scoffing at the 2-on-1 fight, mocking Reggie and Iori as cowards. Despite the blood running from his face and head, he claimed their attacks had done 0 damage. The player was Fumihiko Takaba. Turning to Megumi, Takaba assured him he would help. Megumi hesitated, but there was something oddly genuine in his eccentric demeanor. Remembering the protection Takaba had just offered, he chose to trust him. Reggie and Yori studied Takaba, unsure which era he belonged to. Yori called out, intending to question him, but Takaba misinterpreted the question, assuming Yori was asking if he was funny. To prove himself, Takaba's confidence surged, his cursed energy spiking as he delivered a joke, only to be met with silence. He muttered about the tough crowd, accusing them of leaving their laughs in the womb. But his mood flipped instantly, his entertainer's spirit roaring back. Mid-sentence, he launched forward, delivering a fierce flying dropkick that sent Yori crashing into a nearby building. Reggie noted the sudden surge in cursed energy. Takaba was stronger than his demeanor suggested. The distraction gave Megumi his moment. He attempted to strike from Reggie's shadow, but Reggie leapt away, avoiding the attack. Megumi used the moment to check Kogani, confirming Higuruma had indeed added the rule. Yuji had completed their mission. Declaring himself done with this colony, Megumi offered Reggie one chance to back down. Reggie refused, intent on replacing Chizuru's lost points. As they spoke, Iori staggered back from the wreckage. He called out to Takaba, but the player ignored him. Megumi, seeing the situation, asked Takaba to handle Iori and, if possible, take his points. Takaba agreed, charging his opponent. Iori launched another explosive eyeball, but Takaba batted it aside with a fan, closing the gap. Iori tried to counter, but Takaba blocked his hand and smacked him in the face with the fan, breaking his focus. When Iori looked up to spot Takaba, he was nowhere in sight, only for Takaba to suddenly appear behind him, poking his opponent in the rear as a joke. Humiliated, Iori swung in retaliation, but Takaba's follow-up kick sent him crashing through another building. Watching from a distance, Megumi was impressed, quietly glad Takaba was on his side. Takaba grinned at the praise, promising to take care of Iori and urging Megumi to stay alive until then. Reggie scratched at his head, irritation creeping in. He muttered that Takaba was finished, After all, Yori wouldn't hold back after being mocked. Megumi responded coldly, telling Reggie to worry about himself. With his objectives complete, he could now face him one-on-one without restraint. With his declaration made, Megumi immediately summoned Max Elephant.
Bobanya mantul, rasanya juga mantul.
Frostbite Boba Milk Tea. Kenyalnya boba dan Japanese milk tea yang creamy. Manisnya mantul.
Betul.
Frostbite Boba.
Unleashing a torrent of water toward Reggie. His opponent slipped away with sharp precision, dodging the deluge. The mist gave Megumi an opening. He leapt onto a nearby high-rise, climbing rapidly before vaulting from above, descending toward Reggie with rapid escape Shikigami at his side. Reggie reacted swiftly, tossing a receipt upward. It transformed midair into a net, ensnaring the rabbits. Megumi narrowly avoided being caught himself, landing hard, but controlled onto a chain strung between two poles to break his fall. Without hesitation, Reggie activated his innate technique, contractual recreation. Several receipts turned into kitchen knives, hurling forward as deadly projectiles. Megumi deflected them with his blade, eyes narrowing as the pieces began fitting together in his mind. Reggie caught the recognition and smirked. Megumi voiced it outright. Reggie's curse technique allowed him to manifest whatever was written on receipts. Chuckling, Reggie demonstrated further. Burning a receipt, he recreated the contract, granting himself the benefits of a two-night stay at a luxury Japanese inn. Instantly, the fatigue seemed to wash from him as if he'd just stepped out of a long, restorative soak in hot springs. In stark contrast, Megumi was worn down from the earlier ambush and the strain of summoning multiple Shikigami. Reggie noted this and confidently concluded that without the divine dog, unable to be reconjured once destroyed, Megumi's options were limited. The fight, he declared, was already lost. Megumi gave no rebuttal. Instead, he simply acknowledged the words and turned to flee, summoning Nue to carry him away. Reggie wasn't about to let him escape. With a flick of his technique, he created drones equipped with cameras to track Megumi's movements, following in pursuit on a moped. His chase led them both to a gymnasium. Megumi took a quick glance at the spacious interior, satisfied. It was exactly the kind of terrain he needed. But before he could make his next move, the wall exploded inward as two trucks barreled straight toward him. Reacting instinctively, he slid low, narrowly avoiding being crushed. He barely had a moment to recover when a new threat came from above. Two heavy potted plants dropped from the rafters, smashing into his head. The blow left him dazed, and Reggie was quick to capitalize. He slashed Megumi's back and left arm with a knife, then drove a sharp front kick into his face, sending him crashing to the floor. Breathing hard, blood running from multiple wounds, Megumi pushed himself back to his feet. Reggie stood over him, offering a deal, his life in exchange for his points. Megumi's expression remained unchanged. Drawing on his remaining strength, he calmly unleashed his domain expansion, Chimera Shadow Garden, forcing the barrier to close within the gym and trapping Reggie inside. Reggie was momentarily taken aback, never expecting Megumi to be capable of using domain expansion. But regaining his composure, he immediately retaliated with Hollow Wicker Basket, an anti-domain technique and predecessor to the modern simple domain, designed to negate guaranteed hits. Confident, Reggie believed he had neutralized Megumi's offense until four toads emerged from the swirling liquid shadows, their tongues wrapping firmly around his legs. Confused, he struggled to understand how he'd been struck despite his defense. What he didn't realize was that Megumi's domain was incomplete. Hollow Wicker Basket and Simple Domain did not directly negate cursed techniques. Instead, they neutralized the domain's barrier to nullify its sure-hit effect. Since Megumi had forcibly transformed the gymnasium into his domain, there was no guaranteed hit incorporated in its construction. Chimera Shadow Garden, in this state, served purely to extend the 10 Shadows technique's capabilities to their full potential. That flaw in Megumi's domain worked to his advantage, catching Reggie completely off guard. The first year capitalized immediately, sending 2 shadow clones of himself lunging forward in an ambush. Pummeled and pressured, Reggie fell back, quickly manifesting combat knives to sever the toad's tongues and free himself. He shifted into a counterattack with a machete in hand, but another clone slipped through his shadow, seizing his leg and hurling him toward Megumi's true body. The first year swung his blade in a decisive arc, forcing Reggie to block just in time. The effort left him exposed, allowing the clone to drive an elbow into his face. Overwhelmed, Reggie began to understand the nature of Megumi's tactics. The clones and Shikigami materialized fully before striking, proving this domain lacked a guaranteed hit. In reality, it was even more dangerous than a standard lethal domain. He quickly realized that Megumi would eventually use Max Elephant to flood the arena, drowning him out of the fight. Refusing to allow that outcome, Reggie activated his cursed technique, releasing a flurry of receipts overhead. Megumi summoned Nue to intercept, but the attack came too late. Contractual recreation was already complete. 3 cars manifested above and sank into the shadow-laden floor, confirming Reggie's deduction. The entire domain was Megumi's shadow, also functioning as storage for cursed tools. Reggie correctly surmised that Megumi bore the weight of anything stored within his shadow. Exploiting this, he aimed to bury him under more and more weight until he was crushed outright. Confident in this counter, Reggie prepared to press his advantage. But Megumi, unfazed, reminded him that even an incomplete domain was still a domain, and that shadow existed all around, including above. Suddenly, from the shadows overhead, Max Elephant materialized once again, plummeting directly onto Reggie. The battle turned into a brutal test of endurance, each struggling under the crushing weight. Reggie regretted not keeping the trucks he had summoned earlier, but steadied himself, recalling that he still had a trump card in reserve. Balancing the elephant's weight with one arm, he began fishing for the correct receipt, but before he could activate his ace, the sheer force bore down too heavily. Reggie was driven into the shadows and submerged. With no resistance or buoyancy within, he sank deeper, oxygen fading, consciousness slipping. Megumi remained still, waiting to ensure the fight was finished before releasing the domain. Yet, unexpectedly, one of the submerged cars rose, carrying Reggie back to the surface. Drenched but alive, Reggie explained that objects he recreated typically vanished after commands were fulfilled, but he had deliberately refrained from dismissing the cars, allowing him to order one to rescue him. Now back in play, he immediately summoned a massive 2-story wooden house, easily weighing over 30 tons, intent on crushing Megumi once and for all. But the situation shifted sharply. Despite holding the apparent advantage, Reggie suddenly found himself underwater, Megumi's grip tightening around his neck from behind, using all the accumulated weight against him to drown him. Panicked, Reggie was forced to release his cursed technique, nullifying the car's weight. In an instant, they both surfaced. Gasping for air, Reggie realized he was in the basement pool of the gymnasium. Piecing it together, he deduced that when he threw the building, Megumi had slipped into his shadow and ended the domain, avoiding the blow entirely. The falling house had shattered the floor, forcing Reggie into the pool below. It remained unclear how Megumi could still move under such weight, but Reggie theorized he had ejected himself from the shadow to do so. Crawling from the water, Reggie was met by Megumi, who coolly pointed out that the soaked receipts could no longer be used. Reggie did not confirm, instead countering that Megumi, in turn, could no longer summon Shikigami. The first year agreed, noting that their fight would now come down to physical combat. Reggie struck first, immediately overwhelming Megumi in close quarters. The first year struggled to endure the relentless onslaught,
formas.
Ya.
Ya, ya, mi hermana. Itu mie ayam Mbak Ece. Yeah.
Reggie poised to deliver a finishing blow, only for the attack to halt mid-motion as a lethal strike tore through him. A portion of the left side of his face, ear, and much of his shoulder were sheared off in an instant. Stunned, Reggie turned to see the attacker, Megumi's divine dog. The Shikigami had survived, contrary to Reggie's assumptions. Megumi explained that his Shikigami was far stronger than to be felled by mere kitchen knives. Accepting defeat with dignity, Reggie summoned his Kogami, transferring all 41 of his points to Megumi, telling him to take it as a good deed before succumbing to his wounds. Moments later, Megumi's Kogane awarded him 5 more points for the kill, and he stepped out of the gymnasium with his mission accomplished. Meanwhile, elsewhere in the city, a massive explosion rocked the rooftop of another building. Yori was still in the midst of his fight with Takaba, attempting to blow the comedian away. Yet Takaba remained unmoved, weathering each blast with bizarre confidence, continuing to taunt his opponent while comically urging him to focus. Yori, continuously irritated by Takaba's antics, lunged with a punch, only for his fist to slide off harmlessly. The blow hadn't missed. Takaba's skin was inexplicably slit, covered in some sort of sauce, making the exchange even more absurd. The more Yori fought, the more frustrated he became. No matter how many explosions he set off or how hard he struck, Takaba simply wouldn't take any real damage. His thoughts were broken by Kogani's sudden appearance, announcing that Reggie had been eliminated. Yori paused, taking this in, then decided he'd had enough of this fight entirely. Without another word, he turned to leave, declaring he was going home. Takaba, thinking his opponent was running away, remembered Megumi's request and pestered Yori for his points, but every attempt was met with a flat refusal. It was then explained that Takaba's innate curse technique made anything he believed would be funny a reality. A technique so absurdly powerful, it could even stand against Gojo himself, yet Takaba remained entirely unaware of its true potential. Elsewhere, Remy was running through the streets in a panic. With Reggie gone, she no longer knew what to do. Her entire life, she believed men were supposed to be wolves, there to take care of her, and she assumed someone else would fill that role from here on. That illusion shattered when she found herself cornered by a real predator, a divine dog, its fangs bared and ready to fight. Just before it lunged, Sumiki's voice cut through, telling her brother to stop before he killed someone in cold blood. The divine dog vanished instantly, leaving Remy shocked that she was being spared. On the other side of the city, Megumi felt his sister's intervention with growing frustration, but exhaustion overtook him, and he collapsed where he stood. High above his unconscious body, the angel appeared, hovering unseen by Megumi, the very person he had been searching for now closer than ever. While Tokyo's colonies began to settle for the moment, far to the north in the Sendai colony, the conflict was far more vicious. Here, 4 powerhouses held the colony in a deadlock, their power so immense that none dared to challenge the balance. The first was Druve, once the conqueror of the archipelago during a civil war, sitting at 91 points and wielding 2 Shikigami whose orbiting trajectories formed a domain. The second was Ryu Ishigori with 77 points, possessing the highest cursed energy output of all the culling game players. The third was Takako with 70 points, who could manipulate the very sky itself. The last was Kururushi, a special grade cockroach curse released by Kenjaku from cursed spirit manipulation. With 54 points, it had been lying dormant, waiting for its moment. Their powers, abilities, and motives clashed so much that they'd remained in a tense standoff. But the balance broke the moment Yuta entered the colony and cut down Dhruv. Takako and Ryu immediately sensed the shift as Dhruv's patrolling Shikigami vanished. Both ordered their Kogani to show the player with the latest point update, revealing Yuta as the culprit. They knew the death of one powerhouse meant another's emergence. Kururushi's awakening was near, and with it, the chaos they both dreaded and relished. Meanwhile, Yuta regrouped with the civilians he had been protecting, escorting them into the stadium that had served as Dhruv's base. He assured them it would be safe, urging them to rest, but his words were cut short by a loud, ominous buzzing. Alert, he ordered everyone inside while he searched for the source. It arrived in the form of a massive swarm of cockroaches chasing a fleeing man. Yuta leapt forward, seizing the man's arm and vaulting over the swarm, but there wasn't enough distance. The insect stripped the civilian's lower body to the bone in an instant. The swarm turned on Yuta next, and he barely managed to block the attack in time. Every single cockroach was real, but reinforced with cursed energy, making them faster and deadlier than normal. The situation worsened as the swarm broke off, infiltrating the stadium in pursuit of the other civilians. Without hesitation, Yuta summoned Rika, who smashed a bridge in a single blow, collapsing the structure atop the swarm to drive them back toward him. Prepared for their retaliation, Yuta channeled cursed energy into his blade, swinging with such force that the strike unleashed a massive blast wave, obliterating the swarm in one blow. But their master emerged soon after.
If you can speak basic English and if you can use a computer, then you can explore real opportunities on how you can earn up to $1,000 a month and more as a virtual assistant working remotely, even without a special degree. Let me show you how. So I would like to introduce you guys to a virtual assistant profession, which is really trending right now. This is the remote profession where you basically help entrepreneurs and business owners manage different tasks such as admin tasks, social media management tasks, lead generation tasks, and more.
Thank you guys for watching. Apa